Horizon Forbidden West was one of the most enjoyable games I played last year, and when the Burning Shores DLC was announced, I was thrilled at the opportunity to revisit this world. Having now finished it, I'm glad to have squeezed it in before the litany of huge games releasing over the next few months, like Jedi Survivor, Redfall, Tears of the Kingdom, and Final Fantasy XVI. And it doesn't surprise me at this point, it's almost on brand for Horizon-related content to be overshadowed by other titles. But I'll once again be a champion for the series, because it truly deserves your time. And that goes for this latest expansion pack as well. Set in this world's version of Los Angeles, Aloy sets out to find the last living Zenith, a man named Walter Landra. After gathering some intel from our good friend Silence, rest in peace Lance Riddick by the way, you and your iconic voice will be missed dearly, we set out to the Burning Shores. Quickly, we are introduced to a Quen soldier named Seika who will play a major role in this DLC. After taking out some wide malls, using some new explosive crystal mechanics, we travel to a Quen base called Fleet's End. We meet with the Admiral, who grants Seika permission to seek out the missing half of their fleet alongside of Aloy, and from there, we're pretty much set free to explore, quest, and uncover everything in the Burning Shores. Before we get into the content though, let's touch on this new location in Horizon's world. In my critique of the base game, I talked in detail about how one of its greatest achievements was in building such a believable and expansive world, both in terms of its geographical depiction of a post-apocalyptic America, and in how it filled this world with believable and fascinating cultures rife with their own beliefs, hierarchies, and social norms. So how does the Burning Shores compare? Well, it's surprisingly a bit of a step down. Underwater segments. They were heavily shown off leading up to the base game's release, but Forbidden West never seemed to capitalize on them much. Having an arid mountainous desert taking up a large chunk of your game map will do that. Burning Shores comes along and says hold my beer and covers half of the new map in water. That's right, half of the ruined city is sunken. Yet you still rarely travel under the surface and into the deep. It makes sense because combat isn't an option, arrows don't move too far underwater, there's not much fun to be had there. The consequence of this is that much of this new map is just water, equally boring to guide a skiff across as it is to fly over. It doesn't provide a whole lot to the experience, and being on land isn't much better. While gorgeous visually, you won't run into a whole lot out here in terms of side content like you did in the base games. There's one ruin relic and one cauldron, but everything else is pretty much just machine encounters. There is an area that unlocks late in the DLC with a tad more to do, but it's not something that's going to pull you in. As a result, I found traversing the Burning Shores to be a lot less tangible than in Forbidden West. Often the flyable mounts permit you to just soar to the heavens and fly in a straight line to your destination. It isn't particularly fast either, and with the lack of engagement, it really does feel quite dull. Those second-to-second decisions on what path to take, where to jump, where to climb, and how to navigate the physical earth under your feet was severely lacking here. I yearned to get dirt, gravel, and grass wedged into Aloy's shoes once more, but the sea's constant interruption of ground meant this wasn't always doable. Flying dominated, and not for the betterment of the experience. At the same time, we do get an expansion on the Quen civilization. They were a bit underdeveloped compared to the other tribes in the base game, but we get more insight to them here. Through interacting with a few select NPCs in Fleet's End, the home of the shipwreck crew, you come to learn more about the Quen culture, primarily the relationship between diviners, soldiers, compliance officers, and everyday people. The highest elites of the Quen society gatekeep their people from learning about the times before the apocalypse. Even those permitted to see it are only shown a censored version of the complete truth. Anyone who tries to supersede these rules are subject to prison time and potentially death. You get the vibe that Quen's society is a lot like 1984. Big Brother is always watching. Families turn against their own to try to get a leg up in society, turning in supposed traitors just to be viewed more favorably. It's some wild stuff, but sadly, we only get this surface level information from interacting with them here. The root of the problem is that Burning Shores only has 3 side quests, and only one of them relates directly to learning more about this civilization. In this quest, you'll help some conspirators looking to overthrow the Quen's leaders and their censorship ways. It's here where you uncover more about their societal structure, but it does leave you wanting more. After the Utaru, and especially the Tenakth, were expanded on so greatly, it's a real shame that the Quen don't have another 2 or 3 side quests to really flesh them out here. I would have loved that, and the world building would have been better for it. After this one, there's 2 other side quests. One where you'll meet up with a familiar face from the Frozen Wilds DLC of the first game, and another where you'll help some captured Quen be freed from imprisonment. Despite their involvement, the Quen aren't elaborated on much in this one. Instead, it's about tying into and aiding the main story of the DLC, which is fine. I completed all 3 of these side quests in about an hour and a half or something like that. For comparison's sake, the Frozen Wilds DLC had 4 side quests, but also contained 7 errands, while Burning Shores has 0, at least that I found. That's a big discrepancy, and it just makes the value proposition feel lesser with this DLC. To be clear, these 3 side quests that I did complete were all of quality. I enjoyed them all, and how they tied back into the overall story while continuing to build the world. But it does feel like a few more would have gone a long way in propping up this experience. Of course, there is a cauldron to explore too, which does add some playtime and can be categorized as meaningful content. Certainly nothing to scoff at, but shorter than the other cauldrons. There's also more collectibles and new customizable looks for your outfits. Besides this though, many of the smaller additions seem to be implemented for players with New Game Plus in mind. For example, there's new gear, new weapons, and new skills to experiment with. As for me, I opted to use a new Valor Surge called Warrior's Vigor that boosted my damage with melee strikes while also recovering some health from it. I'd say the most notable new skills though are the ones that make combat a bit more flashy, like shooting from your glider or grabbing onto an enemy. I didn't experiment with these because I'm more of a function over fashion kind of guy, but they certainly add a cinematic flair to combat. There's plenty more to experiment with here in New Game Plus, or on just the machines roaming around the Burning Shores. Speaking of machines, and there are 4 new ones to be found here, although that number does come with an asterisk. One of these, the Bile Gut, is a large machine type enemy based on a frog. It spews a lot of poison and can leap large distances, meaning that you'll want to be constantly moving to avoid getting crushed. It's a really solid encounter, and one mission sees you taking on 2 of them back to back, which was one of my favorite fights. After this though, the remaining 3 are a bit of a letdown. The Water Wing feels like a slightly different version of a Sun Wing, and the Sting Spawn is really just a drone often found alongside of Bile Guts. They had a chance to make a really cool Bumblebee design or a Wasp design, but they flubbed it. And the final new machine is part of the final boss, so I won't touch on it until we reach the spoiler section. But overall, a bit of a letdown in this department. It should also be noted that the Burning Shores did not alleviate a lot of the issues I outlined with combat in my original critique. There are still so many instances in which it feels like too much is happening on screen at once. Either the camera can't keep up with the enemies, they are jumping off screen, Aloy's reload speed is not responsive enough, or getting stun locked. All of these are still huge annoyances that plagued nearly every encounter. I'm by no means an elite gamer, so part of this is on me, but I did feel myself getting bullied around a lot without many new ways to dominate the fights. However, there is something new to help you turn the tides, and it comes in the form of the Spectre Gauntlet. This new weapon controls more like a gun than a bow and arrow. Point, shoot, and destroy. It's part of the main quest too, so you can't miss it. It's a lovely addition, but it does tend to dominate your arsenal once you get it. It's always tempting to use its lock-on feature to target a foe and then blast away at it without a lot of skill. It does have a cooldown if you fire too much though, the ammo gets used up quickly, and locking on can sometimes take a few tries, so it is at least somewhat balanced. The smart thing here is that you don't get it until halfway through a DLC that requires you to have finished the main campaign before you can enter. Sure, you can have your fun with it in New Game Plus, but by then, it's just a fun way of empowering the player in a way that looks and feels sick as hell. So I'm all for it. And yes, there are other legendary weapons to uncover too, my favorite of which was the new spike thrower called Last Argument. So overall, a lot of new toys to play around with here on machines new and old. Okay, now we're going to dive into the main story of the Burning Shores, so if you're sensitive to spoilers, this is a great place to click off the video. If you're going to do so, I'll say this is worth playing for the story alone. Some elements certainly disappoint, but there's enough here to warrant your $20 purchase, especially because of the implications it has for the next game. If you're sticking around though, let's get a move on. Okay, so after entering the Burning Shores, there's 5 main story missions, about an hour each. The first is about disabling a tower that's preventing sea and sky vehicles from getting close, while also introducing Seika and the Quen. The second is about looking for Walter Landra at his last known location and coming up short, while fleshing out Seika's background, including her lost sister. The third focuses on infiltrating Landra's camp, where many Quen have been brainwashed into supporting him, believing him to be their savior. Here, you'll fight back against his loyalists as you learn that many of these people chose to be here voluntarily. The fourth centers on navigating a ruined dinosaur amusement park looking for Landra and Seika's sister, while learning some Quen are literally brainwashed by a machine that Landra controls. So that's the first 4 missions. I'm overviewing them quickly because I believe the game's final mission is where the biggest story beats going forward take place. But make no mistake, those quests are each varied, well thought out, full of good fights, and interesting plot moments to boot. One minute you'll be cooperating with Seika as you place platforms across a giant chasm for the other person to use. The next you'll be dipping in and out of water on a flying machine to avoid incoming rockets, and then you'll just be fighting a big mechanical frog. The point is that there's a lot of variety here, and no quest seems like it double dips from another. In fact, the third and fourth quests parallel some of the best found in the base game. They are that good. And what I appreciate most about them is how they build up Landra as a villain, after the base game failed to really give the Zeniths much context or screen time. You won't come face to face with Landra till the 4th mission, but you're constantly being thrown holograms of him speaking and talking with those who believe him to be their savior. He is a generic bad guy for the most part, make no mistake, he has no redeemable qualities, but even that is something we're able to learn about him, and that's an improvement over Gerard, Eric, and the other Zeniths from the base game. There's still room for improvement in the next outing, but Landra and everything surrounding him was at least a step in the right direction. And finally, that last mission. This is the biggest set piece in the DLC, as Landra revives a Horus. That's right, a metal devil comes back to life. This was an incredible moment, especially with how much time we spent up close and personal with ones who've laid dormant for years. As it begins to boot up, you'll have to complete a stealth segment against its prowling tentacles. It reminded me a lot of the giant snake section in Sekiro. And then, after that, the beast awakens and you'll have a full-on fight against it. And while the idea of fighting this thing was initially really cool, the fight itself did leave a lot to be desired. Because of its immense size, it came down to a hit the weak spot fight. Now, you could argue that's true of all encounters in Horizon, but this is different, let's be real. Most of your arsenal is ineffective against this thing, such as traps, tripcasters, and more. The fight is more scripted as a result. You'll be running around trying to dodge and outrun projectiles without much luck, while missing that constantly moving weak spot. It was a bit frustrating, and it does go on for some time, like it overstays its welcome. It felt more like an endurance fight than an even back and forth. After you fought the humongous mechanical monster and brought it down, you still have to go inside and fight Laundra himself, which ends up being very repetitive. He spams 3 moves: a lightning pulse, these electric discs that hover at you, and a floor attack where you'll take damage if you're standing in the wrong spot. It feels like it takes forever to disassemble and destroy all the components keeping him plugged in, which makes the fight a slog. On paper, fighting a Horus sounds amazing, but in practice, it doesn't allow you to take advantage of the full skill set and arsenal you've become accustomed to. That, paired up with the length of the encounter and the sometimes poor audio design within the fight, made it a so-so encounter when it should have been amazing. But with that, Aloy kills Laundra, stopping his reign over the Quen in the Burning Shores, while also continuing to establish anxiety about the looming threat of Nemesis. And now, there's only one thing left to do: say goodbye to Seika. I've omitted it thus far for story spoiler reasons, but throughout the main story missions, there is a romantic undertone between these two lady heroes. Aloy is shown to be nervous around Seika, muttering under her breath about what will come next for the two, and genuinely being worried for her safety and what she will think of her. In the final moments of the story, Seika admits that she has feelings for Aloy, and the player can choose to accept her advances or turn her down for intrinsic reasons, like her inability to connect with people because of how the Nora abandoned her as a child, or you can decline her for extrinsic reasons, because there's still too much to do in preparation for Doomsday, Ode to the Hand of Nemesis. Regardless, it's clear that Aloy identifies as something other than straight, and this has led many people to start review bombing the DLC, which is so stupid to me. Aloy has often turned down the advancement of men throughout the series, such as the Sun King and Erend. That, along with the relative inclusivity of this world, makes this not a shock to anyone who's been paying attention. Now, you can criticize how the relationship evolves. It happens really fast here, maybe even too fast, and it probably deserved to be in the main game, but the fact that Aloy isn't straight is not a problem at all. For me, this blooming relationship actually makes Aloy a far more compelling character than ever before, and that's what I've always wanted from her. To be clear, it has nothing to do with her being gay or queer, bisexual, or however she would self-identify. How she would do so isn't quite made clear, but that's not the point. The point now is that Aloy feels more human. She's still quite capable of being a savior in almost every regard, but now she's opened herself up to romantic feelings, and all the beautiful moments that come with them, along with the insecurities. Charging in against a fully operational Horus is child's play for her, but worrying about what will happen next with Seika now that this adventure is over gives her anxiety. It makes her nervous to not know what the future holds for them. And with the multiple endings, you can really explore the possibilities of what Aloy may be feeling. It expands on this character and makes her feel human and vulnerable for the first time since the death of Rost, way back at the beginning of the first game. That's incredible, and it's something I've been waiting for a while. I hope the third game can take this further by finding ways to bring Aloy's newfound fling back into the fray and using that to create moments of genuine character growth. Only time will tell. It's quite rare for me to be allured in by a DLC pack nowadays. The game really has to mean something to draw me back in, since there's always something new coming out. Normally, a DLC purchase is reserved for From Software and Pokemon games for me, but this one had to be an exception. While Forbidden West's story and combat both had issues that subtracted from my experience, I couldn't help but to be inspired by the world building done in the game. To me, it truly met and even surpassed that of Elden Ring in my eyes, and that alone was enough to get me on board for DLC. Now that I've finished assessing the Burning Shores, I worry that I've come off more negative than I intended to. Still, the criticisms are fair. The side quests are on par with those in the main game, but there's only a few. The Cauldron is pretty short, completed in like 20 minutes. The new landmass isn't as fun to traverse, and the Quen aren't as fleshed out as the Tenakth. The new machines are underwhelming. That's a lot of issues to note. But there's enough new here between the story missions with excellent quest design, the changes to combat provided by the Spectre Gauntlet and the other skill tree additions, and most importantly, the furthering of Aloy as a character. These are what make the DLC worth playing. And in a way, it almost feels like mandatory content, as I'm certain Seika will play a larger role in the next title. So if you're a fan of these games, Burning Shores is an easy buy, simply for the chance to re-enter this often overshadowed gaming series. I came into the experience wanting more Forbidden West, and I pretty much just got that. Just not as much as I had hoped for in the 10 hours it took to complete. But I think that's the mark of something great, when it leaves you wanting more. Thanks for watching. So that's a wrap on the Burning Shores. Have you played the DLC? If so, what did you think? If you're new to the channel, say hi in the comments below, or consider subscribing. Now is a great time to join our community and our Discord, the link is below, with so many great new games coming out in the next 2 months. Let's talk about them. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter at NopeNapNarp, join our Discord, and as always guys, have a nice day, and take care.